G'day friends and fans. Welcome to Dave Talk Stuff, Ukraine War Update for the 14th of June 2026. Are we reaching the end of the Ukraine War? There's a lot of talk about it. So, before I continue, I'd like to warn you, this has been said before, so don't be surprised if over the coming days, right, you're going to be flooded with all this talk about the World Cup, Iran, and then suddenly, while they're talking to Iran over in Europe, you'll start to see more and more. The meetings will prolong. They're drawing it out. I think Russia and China are trying to both, leverage their positions for as long as they can to avoid, they're always telling us right openly to our faces, right, that they're afraid, and not without historical reason, of the West carving them up. And the West has tried to carve up Russia before and almost carved up China. But at the same time, people in those countries are using the past selectively for their own purposes, just like Ukraine is using the past selectively for its own purposes. Ukraine wants to wash itself of its sins, because remember, Ukraine has committed multiple crimes against humanity. Now, one communist was so bad that the communists executed him because they said he went too far with his purges. Not for the purges, that he just went too far. So, shame. On Ukraine's shame is that they have no shame. But as the war continues, the war of word continues, and I will continue to bring coverage. And right now, do not be surprised that as soon as Iran is over, we hear about Ukraine and Moldavia and other countries ascended to the EU, right, to probably to Europe is hiding the fact and that their economy throughout this war has not grown. In fact, they are running on debt. They are running on scared. Paris, riots in Paris, riots in Berlin, riots in London, stabbings, daily occurrences in multiple countries now, not car attacks, and the media's been covering all this up, and Europe is desperate to use the Ukraine war to focus people's anger externally. Every empire has done this. Crumbling empires need an external enemy to hold together. China will never take Taiwan because if they do, what have they got to point at? What have they got, right? Taking Tibet did not alleviate people's fears. It only exacerbated them, because, the more an empire grows, the more it fears its inevitable end. And Ukraine is not an empire, but it is a tool of a former empire, and is seen as a jewel in the crown for a new empire to take it and go, ha ha, we took something, that's all it is someone's ego stroking just so they can sit there in their dying breath thinking, hey, go, hey, I got you, you know. And you know how childish these people are? Spend a few weeks watching their speeches and listen to how grandiose their promises and they're always talking about the future, you know. A relationship with Europe is like Windows 98. Oh, it's going to be wonderful, Bill Gates. It's going to do all, it's going to bring you virtual reality. It's going to bring everything to life. They've been promising for 30 years all these wonderful things. Oh, green energy is going to clean water and clear skies and breathable air, and gone will be the congestion. And then they bring millions of people in and double the congestion. Paris is covered in garbage. The only reason why the streets of Kiev are clean is because of all the fires. They don't show you those. The burnings every few days, huge stockpiles of garbage are burnt. Ukraine is coming to a slow and grinding halt on some days, where people are sitting in traffic for hours trying to get home. They don't want to admit that Ukraine, for most of Kiev, doesn't want to know what to do. It's got millions of displaced people flooded to the cities. They can't afford they're trying desperate to get people to work the farms. I believe their debt is growing like 9 to 11 billion a month. Their spending is just on the war alone is more than their GDP. And the only reason why they're not broke already is, and out, they should be out of funds by all rights. It's just that they're not out of funds because the Europeans keep pouring more money in, and they've just asked for another 9 billion on top of that. None of that's recoverable. Most of it will go up in smoke. And it's gotten to the point where museums are selling their old tanks. Now, yesterday I said they were Ukrainian tanks. I made a mistake. They're made in Sweden. They were allegedly sold by a museum to Ukraine. But they're claiming, Ukraine is claiming these are new designs, which they're not. Okay, they're copies of the Panzerstück 4 or basically German assault gun, right, on wheels. They're claiming it's an amazing weapon, where in fact it was when Russia had predominantly T-34s, but its big heavy tanks outgunned it. Now, I don't know why Russia has not fielded its full artillery capabilities, but they're withholding. They have a smaller force. Ukraine is claiming to have destroyed hundreds of artillery over the last week, yet Russia continues to advance. The number of drone strikes reported is down, and yet they're taking advantage of the fact that Russia doesn't report how many strikes it conducts. But Russia's reporting today that it conducted successful missile strikes on Ukraine, and yet not one is reported by Ukraine. Not one on the map. Remember when they used to report the position of the Baltic Fleet? They've stopped doing that. Remember when they claimed we sank a submarine? They haven't sunk a submarine. They damaged one. It was towed to Sochi, I think. Remember when the other day Ukraine claimed to have destroyed a Russian grain ship? Turned out to be Turkish. And it wasn't a grain ship after all. It was a fishing boat, a Turkish fishing boat. How do you make that huge mistake? Because the media in the West is complicit in the lies, like even Fox. It's why so many people are disappointed, right? The Fox News is supposed to be above the politics of Ukraine and the politics of the Democrat Party. Instead, it's increasingly infested with people who just wear the coat of being right-wing, make a mockery of CNN and its propaganda, but then they themselves won't call out the lies and the hypocrisy in Ukraine. Even they won't cross that line. And increasingly people are disillusioned with the Republican Party because they won't call out the bullshit and the lies. Tulsi Gabbard is feeling jubilant right now, is that she's proven beyond a doubt. At least Tulsi Gabbard got it out there, and she wasn't hampered by Trump, and Trump approved her releasing this information that under Biden and other administrations, Obama had biolabs in Ukraine. And then when Biden lost the election, he shut them down. But the evidence is still there. And people won't go in the media and hammer home the fact, and the Democrats, that there's this huge apparatus of liars who caused this war, who will never suffer the consequences of causing war. Waging war for the purposes of profit is a crime against humanity. It's not only a crime. It was once considered so bad that America vowed to stamp out the practice. But after they were done with the Nazis, they gave the collaborators who brought about the end of the Nazi regime, and those they captured who promised to continue their work for the Americans, they all gave them new lab coats and new names, except for the really famous ones. And they paraded the really famous ones around saying, look, these guys, they came to us, they defected, they helped stop the Nazi regime, But they still treated them like POWs for the rest of their lives. But there's no acknowledgement that there's nothing but lies. We didn't win World War II. There was no real victory. There was nothing but a blood trail. We destroyed civilization itself for the sake of profit. Which is, and I'm not talking about just America. I'm talking about the entire purpose of the war. The people were, and it's the same in Ukraine. People were led to believe back in 2014 that the only way to end government corruption in Ukraine was to overthrow the government, to make them fear the people. But the moment they did that, the people, the minority who took over Ukraine, started getting increasingly violent, murdered people, murdered opposition, drove out other political parties, and the army and the police just sat there and let them do that. just like the previous revolutions in Ukraine, those who had the power to stop it didn't, because they wanted to stay in positions of power. That is making war for profit. Right? The coup in Ukraine, funded by Barack Obama, was a crime against humanity that has led to the deaths of over 1 million people, as a crime punishable only by death, by the way. And because of the political precedent it would set, and it would create, and the left would and have made threats and tried to even carry out said threats. Again, America has to fix its own backyard, just like Ukraine has to fix its own backyard. Europe can't fix Ukraine. You can't save people who are willing to go to war to stay in power. That there would be no war in Ukraine if it wasn't for the ethnic cleansing. And the war in Ukraine should have been against Ukraine by the West for ethnic cleansing. Because that's what you did in Kosovo, was it not? It was the whole point of the breakup of Yugoslavia, was it not? Now, the war is neither going good nor bad for the Russians. It's going bad, but not worse. Bad, but not terrible for the Ukrainians. Most of the front, the Russians have not gained territory today. I believe there is no major city that has fallen, though Lyman is close to falling. The strategic city of Krovno-Luka is not yet close to falling, but its position on the Donetsk River, guarantees that Russia has to capture it, as with all the towns along the river. And as you can see, ongoing operations, the Ukrainians and Russians are fighting in the forest. This is a hard territory. It's patrolled. The Ukrainians know they have to stop Russia from getting within artillery strikes on Savansk, because every town that's destroyed is probably going to stay destroyed. Ukraine is desperate. It can no longer afford to keep fixing buildings. It handed out billions in contracts last month. This month, there's no talk. There's no talk of rebuilding. They're just quietly asking Germany to keep rebuilding its power stations and railway. Keep it. So obviously, if they're obviously the Russians are doing more damage to Ukraine than Ukraine is letting on, and the Germans and the media will let you know. But because even photographing a power station in Ukraine will get you shot, people are afraid. You can't even report a story in Ukraine. It's all any story you report any story in Ukraine, and it's treason. The media is complicit in the lies and cover up. So people cannot make an honest, informed decision. And most people, being lazy, will only make the decision the state or the establishment thrusts upon them. Now we're getting to the point where these towns, I mean, even if they don't fall, are never going to be the same. They're going to be, a lot of them are going to be empty. A lot of them are going to be, if they aren't ready, loaded with foreigners to work the fields. Probably Indians, because we know recently India sent envoys to Ukraine for talks. It was only a week ago when Zelensky said we're close to driving the we're driving the invaders out of Konstantinovia. No, anyone else would have been dismissed. Anybody who'd lied to, if a general came up and says, "This town, we've almost captured it," and then a week later the enemy's double its territory and killed thousands, that general would have been dismissed or sidelined. But not Zelensky. No, Europe doubles down on dumb. And that's the problem in the world, isn't it? Ego. Doubling down on dumb. Right? World War II was so... See, World War II was a precedent that hasn't been lived up to since. And that is, you couldn't afford to lose the war. So you had... the commanders were under such pressure that any failure could not be tolerated, because if they didn't dismiss a colonel, they would have been dismissed themselves. They would have. They were under such pressure, right? MacArthur was told every day, if this operation fails, look at how Monty with Market Garden. He was sidelined. He was relegated. He was told to obey Patton's every command from then on by Churchill. He was humiliated, paraded before all the other generals, and all the other generals were told not to listen to Monty. He was stripped of authority. After the war, he was given a token position to make up for it, because Churchill felt that the humiliation had gone beyond the professional. But everybody takes a little bit of insult or professional criticism personally. I mean, Market Garden on paper was a good idea. It's just that when something's never done before, it was only and that there was some moderate success, and there was a lot of heroic action. The ultimate, it's like Konstantinovia. We'll see. Probably within a decade, a movie about it, and the heroic stand, just like Stalingrad, except this is what Ukraine wanted, a Stalingrad, so they could have heroes to parade, because the establishment needs heroes for people to worship. If Zelensky fails, they won't have... That's what this whole war is about, right? Zelensky and his cronies are waging war in Ukraine to have themselves immortalized as heroes of Ukraine, to erase the past, to reinvent themselves, to get this fortress Europe mentality, and that Captain Sky Shield, and they're going to have jobs for life, and very well paying jobs at that, and their corruption will all be excused or covered up or never investigated. Europe is not living up to its ideals. How can they talk about ascending Ukraine? And again, I said, as soon as the football is over and this Iran thing is over, this is all you're going to hear about, is making Ukraine part of Europe. That's inevitable. Now, I'm not going to say that usually when Europe talks about something being inevitable, it fails, because most of the time I can't think of a single ascension that has failed. And that's the sad thing. Is that because they're so good at it, or is it because they're so bad at it? Now, Konstantinovia is not going to be the Stalingrad of Ukraine. This is going to be the central battle right here. It's going to be Russia's hardest and biggest battle right here. Because Ukraine knows, once this fortress line is diminished, right, Russia captures and digs in, they'll refortify and dig in across this line that Russia has a big reserve of equipment just outside the range of Ukraine's missiles, all ready to be sent to battle. Should Europe make that mistake of going to war, even if they win this war, it'd be so devastating. Look at how devastating it is for Ukraine. Look how tragic it is for Ukraine. Ukraine is a tragedy of its own making. Remember when Ukraine said, whatever, all these promises they used to make. They're not making these speeches anymore outside of Parliament. They're still making them in Parliament, making all these threats and promises. We're going to rain down missiles on Moscow. Well, 7 were fired and 7 were shot down. And that wasn't Russian propaganda either. It was open source intelligence. Heck, even the Institute of Study of War keeps saying how negative everything's going for the Russians, yet the Russians, they have to turn around and admit, but the Russians continue to advance. Oh, reckless disregard is the reason. Yeah, all war is reckless disregard. Okay? If Ukrainians valued their lives, they would recklessly disregard the obvious, and they would have formed more strategic defense lines than higgly-piggly sitting in towns waiting for the Russians. And patting each other on the back saying, we're superior than the Orcs. Yeah. So superior that we need help every day. Help from mercenaries, help from British intelligence, help from French and German saboteurs, help from those who oppose Putin, I guess. And for what? It is none of the billions wasted achieving anything. Death and destruction continues. And the morale will not improve, but the noticing will continue. And eventually people will notice and you'll finally understand that you should not wrest so much power into anyone, particularly presidential power. I think Ukraine might be the first country to strip presidential power, to strip parliamentary power, to strip military power, to strip down police power, because this war might actually burn into their brain the idea that you cannot wrest power outside of the collective body of the people, that the people should have the ultimate vote. And if they don't, then they're not free citizens. If the military will not, whether it might be Iran, it might be Ireland, but citizen after citizen are realizing there is no left or right, there is no truth but power. I am not offering you power. I'm offering you to open your eyes and see that it belongs to you in the first place. It does not belong to the Communist Party. It does not belong to union leaders. We need a new word, because union leaders, corporations, they're all acting in self-interest. Everyone's acting in self-interest. Now we either accept that or we stop complaining about it. But we got to and then don't complain when they put their boot on your neck, because you won't resist. Because that's what politics is, to lure you in, to lower your resistance so that someone can put their boot on your neck. Be the change you want to be. And if you build a community, it will happen. If you don't build a community, don't blame anyone but yourself for not taking the opportunity to build now. Because in 10 years' time, you will have for every year the WF is in power, they double their membership. They double the number of politicians in their control. They control almost all the left-wing parties across the world. And the corporations and the unions and the financial system is so entwined, it is almost one entity. So don't think the left are anything other than authoritarian and greedy and nothing, everything they say. Every time the left whines about capitalism, they're talking about themselves, because they are the ones in position of power, wealth, and privilege. I am a mere humble merchant. I am a mere writer, content creator, trying to make a living. I'm sponsored by you, the viewing audience, not a government or corporation. And the whole point of the majority of YouTubers is to be a tick. That I reject that notion. I am selling you product, not hopes and dreams. But reality doesn't seem to be sexy enough. I'm trying. I really am. Empire Valves, that's one word, Empire Valves at myshopify.com, your one-stop shop for enchanting treasures based on my writing. Thank you for your purchase and your support, even if you only click the like button. Please and thank you. On with the show, and I'm telling you right now, this is propaganda, but it's important to understand the difference between the various forms of propaganda. In that, this is informative and has value because it is showing us what Russia is capable of, and it shows us why the Europeans hate Russia so much, because Russia, one tiny state, is capable of more than the United Europe is capable of. Europe, with a much larger population, with more scientists, with more money, with more resources, almost, right? Then Russia. Russia has raw resources, but they don't have. They basically were a gas station with nuclear weapons, and it could have been perfectly fine, both the left and right, in Europe, but predominantly the liberal establishment just cannot stand the fact that little Russia can keep up with them. And sometimes briefly surpass them, but so far, the Su-37 and 57 are better than the Eurofighter. So the Eurofighter was scrapped, not officially. They just re-evaluating their positions right now and looking to invest in the sixth generation model, So every time, every time, Europe has done this before. When it was the F-16, the Europeans tried the Typhoon. Now the Eurofighter is just yet another boondoggle, and it's like the California high-speed rail. It's nothing but corruption. It's pretty much just redesigning the exterior of the Mirage 2000 and sticking a new sticker on it. Now, again, like France on its own, France, Germany, and Britain on their own do better than they do together. The problem is when you have rivalry, you have more time with petty infighting, which is why the European Union should have stuck to the European Common Market, because that's what everyone voted on. The European Union was not voted on. Now, the Zuba automated defense system has undergone, and as you can see, it's got the new 30mm chain gun. These, of course, fire airburst rounds. This is a automated drone system. It's put on the back of a truck, usually or sometimes, though increasingly, for proper overland travel, the BLTR, or the BTR, or the T90 chassis, whatever they got on hand. Sometimes they use the T72 chassis. If a tank's destroyed enough, they flap one of these on it. But increasingly, they're taking the human factor out of drone identification and destruction. There is a Batwing. Now, while it may have Ukrainian markings, it's in fact an Israeli aircraft. There it is. They tow sometimes 2 or 3 of these at a time, put them in a field. Every night they move them. They are targeted by Ukrainian drones, and they do move them about. Now, Russia is moving to mass produce these. They haven't yet, but they are moving. And the company behind the Zu-23, of course, has upgraded has the gun contract, public disclosures in Russia on contracts. These are tens of billions. So Russia does not seem to be thirsting for money. But the idea is, and current measure is, within seconds of identification, they could take out 1 to 3 drones within half the time of a human operator. But they do have a human oversight with the hand on the kill switch, ready to take over. Whoops. Hold on. Pause. There's a generator, a pretty much what we call a cricket AI, because basically I see, I do, just straight from identification of target to destruction of target. No processing, nothing other than point gun at it, and within seconds of identification, it's eliminated. Human operator is just there to make sure it doesn't aim at an aircraft. Because it's a waste of bullets. It's not going to hit it or even destroy it. It's maybe a low-flying helicopter, but anything big, yeah. Now, again, these are towed out, set in motion, but for now, it's still predominantly testing. They are testing it on captured Ukrainian drones. Now, it's predominantly autonomous. Does not need large fire teams, but it does have optical secondary. So it does have human factor possibilities. Now, you may remember they did just recently increase. Yeah, they did add optical sights and fire assist to their. But that's for their older models. That because they're not taking the older models off the line. They're still. It's just that they're not producing any of the new. They're not producing any of the older models anymore. But yeah, they've taken a 1962 model, 30mm, put a new muzzle on it, programmable, digital targeting, and airburst ammunition, again with programmable distance timing. You might notice that some models are 2-gun, 3-gun, 4-gun. Some are 2x2. Some are flat. Some of them are flat. They're just testing different models. Some, because of their weight, are only for smaller vehicles. These are more fixed positions that they roll out to the woods around Moscow and other places. Now, you do have shipborne as well. The new rotary trigger, it's basically a piston engine that actually pulls the trigger back, and as it comes around, it releases it. Like a forget the name of the cog, but it comes around, it pulls it back, and then poof, and then it comes around and pulls it back, and poof, poof, poof. But it just moves at such speed. Yeah, but it's got a limiter, so it doesn't get pulled back too far in case the momentum, the momentum doesn't pull the trigger back too far. It's actually got a lot of work done, a lot of machinery in Russia. Used to be very. Russia's trying to lift its craftsmanship, its quality. Notes that even though you could mass produce something at low quality, yeah, that's the most common drone. Is just strap a warhead to a standard delivery mechanism. But as I said, right now, when dealing with groups of UAVs, 1 to 3 at a time seems to be the benchmark that they can achieve. And I know, if you know anything about the Aegis system, it's way better than that. Again, the only thing it's not, Europe isn't pissed off that Russia is surpassing them, because most of the time Russia is only catching up with Europe, not America. Europe is just afraid that Russia will take its position. They're not worried that if Russia falls in the 5th place behind India, they're worried that Russia will come back into the top 5, not the top. They're not worried about if Russia falls out of the top 10. They want that. But right now, they're afraid if Russia keeps rising, that it'll eventually challenge Europe once again for economic dominance. See, Europe's afraid of competition because ultimately they want to rest, but they don't want to rest after an honest day's work. No, they want to sit back and just watch the passive income roll in. So it may look on paper that Russia is decreasing. 180. Oh, look, Dave, there wasn't a big 700 drone attack. It was only 102, then 118, then 100. Russia's done for, Dave. Yeah, I can see the comments that they're not going to be so polite. I don't know why they're not polite, but hey, if you're rude, YouTube is just going to go, I'm not going to tolerate you, man. I don't tolerance. Tolerance ain't a Christian virtue. So, remember Google? Remember Eric Schmidt, how he was against war and war is evil, and Google will do no evil. Turns out Eric Schmidt is the owner of a war factory and profiting off the war with Russia and selling drones to Kiev, the Hornet drone, according to official data. It's made by Swiftbeat, owned by Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO. The first use of combat drones in the special military operation recorded in March 2006 when these drones attacked Donetsk. And equipped with satellite navigation, they were using civilian satellites for war. War. What for profit. Now, Russia's making threats to those who were responsible for the attack of Stablensk sleep with one eye open, because one of these days we'll put a nice pic through it. That's it. That's simple threat. Nothing dramatic. Nothing. No drama. No, we're taking you to court. No, they're done with the UN. More than you are. Russia's more. Russia doesn't like the UN either. Russia and Americans have got a lot more in common than you realise. I mean, if you were to sit with a beer and didn't realise you're having a beer with Russian, you'd have the same complaints, the same fears, the same disappointments, almost identical. And fuck Europe. They're a bunch of ungrateful assholes. And they really are. Now, when they're young and naive and fresh and on their own, they're quite individual and quite nice and full of hope and promise, and heck, even talk about rights with passion and not just private property, but respect for human life, all the usual things, Don't ram your ideas down my throat and all this stuff. Don't put your boot on the neck. Treat ethnic Hungarians in Ukraine with respect, all that stuff. And the EU Minority Action Plan. No, Europe should be, you know what, this Zelensky's a bitch. We should invade from the west and crush Kiev and tell the Russians that they can have the four oblasts if they accept the rest of Ukraine as neutral. Europe doesn't have brassies anymore. Europe doesn't respect human rights or property rights. No, Europe is it's no truth but power. It's all power. If Europe was true to its rights, it would have put the WEF on trial for crimes against humanity, not funding it. George Soros would be a footnote in history as a Nazi collaborator, not as the world's most evil philanthropist. Yeah, who funds coups and wars. Poor profiteer extraordinaire. Now, Russian missile stockpile grows. Now, if you believe that Russia produces up to CCI scanners per month, congratulations. Now, Lockheed Martin, you think they really deliver around 50 PAC-3s, interceptors a month? Come on, be realistic. But let's just say, if we go by these figures, Ukraine is FUBA. But it's not. So these figures aren't right. But they must be representative of the scale. And as they are representative of the scale, given the fact that Russia is able to launch more and more missiles, why did they stop recently? Maybe Ukraine did hit a missile stockpile. Maybe Russia just put a whole bunch of them on display in Belarus and then buried them as a fallback because they see the American deployment from moving from Germany to Poland as a possibility that America is preparing for a war with Russia, or at least a European invasion between Poland, Ukraine, and Romania, attacking, backed by Britain and America and others, to attack both the Russian, to attack Belarus or the Ukrainian positions, or to bolster the Ukrainian army. All are possible. Remember, the Russians don't want to give away what they know, and the Americans don't want to give away what they know, and the Europeans seem to be the only ones who want to give away anything. But the Ukrainian forces are spread thin. They are increasing under pressure. The European opposition, the Ukrainian opposition, heck, even the Russian opposition is saying, that the only criticism the Russian opposition has of the war, and that's external, not internal, is that Putin hasn't executed the war to its full, the Russian army to its full capabilities to secure what they deem Russian territory, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 should be just Russian shoulder to shoulder all the way through. But that's not how war works. That's how you get people gunned down in mass. The drone war, yes, I think increasingly there is, and I would think that autonomous drones and artillery and other weaponry, I think the electronic battlefield is reaching saturation, and that is why they are turning to autonomous drone attackers to, once they gain the advantage, then they may prosecute endgame. Now, Ukraine will try, and the British particularly will distract you about these, the Russian Shadow Fleet. Those are just pawns in a game. The captains know what they're signing up for. They're usually Syrian or Indian, or they're not Russian. Okay? Increasingly, it's not even, it's just a little bit of side money for those who can rock up at Russian ports, buy some oil, and even if they get caught, it's all good, baby. You know, it's all games. And this is the sad part, is you don't have to play these games. It's just bored people doing boring things. And maybe, now and again, there's a bit of entertainment in there. And that's where I come in. And the entertainment is watching fools be fools. Oh. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Really, please, if you get this far into a video, please click that like button. Heck, even if you get halfway through a video, if I gave you a wee bit of smile, give me a bit of love back, will ya? Hit that like button. Alright, so thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You know what to do. Join my Patreon. Buy my books. Buy my merch. Be a love bunny, will ya? Give me some sugar. I just want to make a living. I'm not the next Elon Musk. God knows. I wish I was. I'm sure you wish you were too. I'm not stupid. So, see you in the next one. Bye for now.